Hello and welcome to Signal Shift. As you would know, Horizon Shift Lab and Signal Shift are going to be very different this year and going forward, as it's just me now. When we started off 2025, our keyword for HSL was experiment. And I think a lot of that happened in our personal lives, behind the scenes, and not in relation to HSL. But it allowed us to test what matters to us, where we want to put our time and our effort, and what excited us. And while it led to different roads for both my former partners, Lana and Sue, who I'm going to miss terribly, it did reaffirm for me the work I'm doing and want to craft in this space and others. So where we are at with HSL is something I did not foresee. And it's been a lot of reflecting and figuring out the new direction for HSL. And I'm still in the throes of that. But I am excited about what is coming up ahead because there will be new and different offerings. So thank you for being here, your support throughout 2025, and I hope to depend on it in 2026 too. I will say that the intention is definitely to keep the podcast going, but I doubt you want to hear my lonesome voice talk about signals. So a guest-driven podcast makes the most sense. I'm in the process of securing guests. So in the interim, there are actually episodes that we never released to YouTube. And they were really good topics that were released just on the audio platform. We actually did an audio podcast for 8 months before getting onto YouTube, a good 40-something episodes that are not on YouTube. So I will be releasing some of the best of those over the next few weeks. What a year 2025 has been. In LA, we started it off with tragic fires, but the year also brought great things, incredible travels, precious family time, lots of fun, lots of learning. In numerology, it was a 9-year. And there are definitely things that I love, but I'm happy to close the chapter on. Some of those, Stranger Things, which as much as I loved as a show, and I want to believe Conformity Gate, I think we all have to accept is over, and that chapter's done. For me personally, it was a relationship to England in a certain sense. I've lived there for a bit, have always had very strong ties with the country and family there. And my husband and I had a great trip there, and we binged watched The Crown as well. But it's really interesting coming back from there. There's a certain closure on that relationship. So that was another thing for me. And then the third one, and I'd love to hear if others felt the same way as lifestyles are changing, but restaurants as kind of this default gathering place really changed for us last year. It was swapped out by coffee shops and tea places and just outdoor spots and so forth. But I really saw quite a big shift in that, just a natural progression for us with that last year. So yeah, certain things I'm kind of happy to close the chapter on and move forward into a new year. So this week's episode is one of our most downloaded audio episodes of 2025. It was about the change in our drinking habits and how and why we are drinking less. It was, of course, an ode to dry January, which I think is still happening this year. So if any of you are actually partaking in dry January, I think you'll really appreciate this episode. The trend certainly continues with the same headlines making rounds again, right? And things like coffee clubs and parties replacing nighttime and alcohol-scented ones. And we've spoken both about the shift in our drinking habits, but also about the shift in how we use our time at night and the activities we do at night versus what we do in the day. We're going to be doing more stargazing, of course, at night, and more partying in the mornings, maybe, with coffee. So yeah, have a listen. If you have listened on the audio podcast, then this would be a repeat one. But for those on YouTube, and if you've only ever watched on YouTube, this is a fresh episode for you. So I do hope you enjoy it. I am not a drinker or a sugar consumer, so my drink of choice, and I wanted to show that today, is always Martinelli's. They have a version that does not have any alcohol, sugar, or additives. It's just made with apples. So I will raise a glass to our collective health, inner growth, and abundance all around for 2026. The word for me, and I think for HSL too, for 2026 is going to be liberate. And I'll talk about that and share more on that in the weeks to come. So thank you for being here. Please be sure to tune in next week and enjoy this week's episode. Hello and welcome to Signal Shift. I'm Rocky and I have Lana and I have Sue with me. And today, inspired by Dry January, which is pretty much over now, or ending, which I'm sure many are grateful for. But we are talking about alcohol consumption. Now, Dry January is a month where people abstain from alcohol, seeing it as, sort of a personal challenge to take on. It was started as a campaign by the UK charity called Alcohol Change UK. And historically, we've always heard that some types of alcohol are actually good for certain aspects of our health. But more recent studies claim no amount of alcohol is safe to consume. I think it's fair to say that when it comes to alcohol, the messages are very confusing right now. Alcohol can be traced back to 3000 BC and, quite frankly, earlier in history. There's really just no record of when exactly it started. It's been a ubiquitous part of our cultures and our world for centuries. But are the tides shifting or not? And how are we changing our drinking habits? Americans seem to have earned a reputation for drinking more water than any other country or region, EU being one of those regions. And compared with the European Union, for example, US adults are drinking an average of about 57.5 ounces of water per day, while British adults are drinking about 33 ounces per day. And, there's a trope somewhere in there of an American with a massive water bottle. I think that comes to mind for all of us. So, Sue, Lana, what are your signals this week? And I'm curious, is Dry January a thing in your world?
Oh, I'd love to start. And I've seen, and I'm curious whether this aligns with what both of you found, but just an overall decline in terms of the alcohol industry's sales. And there's a couple of things that people are pointing to. One is the consumer health concerns, like you were saying, Rocky. The other is the use of GLP-1 drugs, like Ozempic, for example. That Ozempic not only suppresses kind of your appetite, but it also suppresses wanting to drink, that feeling of wanting to drink too. And so they've tied those things together, change in behavior, and not just for food, but for alcohol as well. And then there's something around kind of the younger generation that they don't want to, they're consuming less alcohol than the older generations before them. And so the signal that I found kind of in that context is the growth of these new types of drinks that are kind of like mood enhancing drinks, right? And so the one that I wanted to talk about is called Brez, B-R-E-Z, and it's microdose cannabis and mushrooms in a can. And so this is very low levels of THC and CBD. That it's actually derived from hemp, and so it's federally legal. But it also has not psychedelic mushrooms, but it has lion's mane. And so lion's mane is a mushroom that you can find it at the farmer's market, but it's more medicinal, right? So it's gained a lot of popularity because it has potential cognitive and neurological benefits. To me, I think we're seeing a lot of the stuff that we've talked about before in this signal, which is like, okay, a growing acceptance of microdosing, right? Because they even say up front, it's a microdose in a can. So something that this has become so mainstream, you can do it in like an everyday context. It's packaged in this very familiar format, which is the canned beverage, but it's really like bridging recreational and wellness, like the rise of functional intoxication. So it's substances that are both, it's the effect that it gives you, but they're saying like, oh, this also gives you a benefit. And so it's really related to that like optimization mindset. It's the convergence of like supplement plus like recreational substances. And I was really struck by like the language and the marketing of this drink, right? So they say, they're like, people like the reviews are like, oh, this integrates into my lifestyle, right? And so they're using a lot of language around wellness and mindfulness and enjoyment. And so it's really kind of this shift from alcohol that, like you said, like we now studies say it's like, totally not good for you. We know that it leads to cancer, right? So it's kind of the shift from a vice really to more of this like personalized mood drink that can actually be good for you. So that's my signal. And yeah, so curious, how that aligns with what you both found.
I love that. I love that, Lana. And yeah, I don't drink alcohol for health reasons, right? So yeah, I love it because I could have that, and I have coffee drinks and similar with those sorts of ingredients with the lion's mane or the reishi mushroom. So knowing that okay, this takes it even a step further, and yeah, that sounds really really cool. So I actually want to try that product out. So I think that's so smart, right? I think all products are moving in that sort of we want to remove the bad and we want to enhance the good. So that tracks. It tracks. And Sue, what was your signal?
Yeah, it's definitely along the lines of health and wellness. Lana, I don't know if I've seen Brez in the grocery store, but there's definitely a section of beverages in the health and wellness section that are so beautifully packaged, but I have no idea what's in them. And then, yeah, the marketing is just like, you're going to feel great after you drink this. But yeah, I wonder if in the future, those kind of beverages will also just be integrated in the grocery store with like the wine and spirits section, for example. So speaking of wine and spirits, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is happening with wine, because I think similar, Lana, to what you were saying, wine sales are just down so much. They said, I think last year, wine sales went to an all-time low since 1996, which is a little bit crazy. People are talking about like a wine industry crisis, all of these things. China consumption is down 60% over the last 50 years. And even in France, I love this quote someone gave. It was basically like, your grandfather drank 300 liters of wine, then your father drank 180 liters, and now the son today would be drinking just 30 liters. So it's been this global trend if you think of this history over many more decades. So I was thinking, Rocky, like, is the future of wine dry? Would this lead to non-alcoholic sales and things like that? But I was actually thinking along the lines of wellness. The one bright spot I found in the wine industry was around what they're calling natural wine. You can define it in a bunch of ways, but it's like no added chemicals, no pesticides, things like that. But yeah, according to several news articles I saw in the New York Times and Decanter magazine, they're saying that organic wines or natural wines have really been booming. And even in the last year, there's like a national retailer named Majestic. They said natural wine sales doubled in the past year amidst all of this other decline. And young people are attracted to natural wine. And so I was thinking, yeah, maybe along this idea of like health and wellness, because there's minimal intervention after production, you're getting kind of the benefits of the soil, of the environment. And a lot of these producers employ more environmentally friendly practices. They're more sustainable. They do regenerative ag, like things like that. So Lana, to your point as well, it's like, oh, there might be a health benefit here. I don't actually know that there's any study that says that this is true, but I think that that's the feeling. Like, if you're going to drink wine, this is more true to the earth, more climate friendly, all of these things that I think people are enjoying. And I would hope the taste is also getting better. I've definitely tried natural wines in the past and it's so hit or miss. So maybe they're also getting a little bit more standardized in how you can produce this well. But yeah, I imagine just in the future, maybe wine is more natural. It's instead of highlighting maybe like what vineyard or what brand, maybe the focus is on labeling the type of soil that it's in or something else. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, totally, Sue. I haven't ever tasted even like years back a natural wine, so I'm so curious. And then I know you said it don't taste so great, so that's really interesting. But I mean, thinking back to history again, right, and alcohol having such, yeah, like tracing right back, every society and culture has had them, right? It's just fermented fruit. It's taking grapes, it's letting them age and ferment, right? It's just a question of how do we make it like the healthiest, right? And to me, I'm like, okay, let's not add sugar. Let's add something else, right? Right? To maybe sweeten it up, like add dates, to it in the fermentation process, right? And then yeah, there's no pesticides and I mean, I'm like, I can't imagine that's bad then, right? That would probably be good, right? Without chemicals and if it's a natural sort of drinks. And is that how, prehistoric ancestors, I don't know, is that what they were doing and it was fine? Did we just move away from the essence of it? And is this getting us back to it? So I think that's really interesting. And I will share that like the one thing that I do have is I have you get apple cider juice, right? Which is just like, yeah, it's fermented and carbonized and nothing else added. It's just apple juice. But that's my champagne. So there we go. I really think there's something in that. So really interesting. Yeah, okay. I was, yeah, I suspected, okay, both of you might have signals right in the sphere of this. So I went a little bit outside, but you'll see how it all converges and makes sense. So my signal is the rise of nightmares. And at first glance, this might seem a little unrelated, right? But a pattern will emerge, right? So Amsterdam became the first city to formally appoint a night mayor. It was either in 2012 or 2014, really establishing kind of systems, roles, and rules to how do you govern a city after dark, and the fact that we should be governing a city after dark as well, right? And pretty soon after, New York City followed, and right now it's claimed or estimated that there's about 80 night mayors globally. This is just in a decade, right? That's the extent to which the trend has kind of taken off. So, what happens if we don't drink? Nightlife changes, right? And you see this convergence, I think, that may come, which is less bars or less sort of alcoholic bars. We'll see the rise of non-alcoholic bars. Like there's one called New Bar in San Francisco, and they sell drinks like the phony Negroni. So, yeah, you can get everything but alcohol at this. Yeah, in every other sense, though, it's a bar. When that happens, right, there's less violence, it's kind of safer because people are not intoxicated. And this is kind of merging with another trend, which is nightclubs on the decline, right? And, this, I can imagine a lot of parents of teens breathing a sigh of relief, but there's a parallel happening here of nightclub activity changing and nightclubs on the decline. I'd have to check the stat, but I think I read somewhere that I think in 2024, about 5 nightclubs were closing per week in the UK, which has always been a kind of, very much party, nightclub, nightlife destination. So really interesting. And it makes me wonder about things that we've touched on before, right? But I was like, oh, well, museums could then open at night for longer hours. And all of those who are working during the day, we actually get to enjoy certain things we can't at night, right? And we kind of spoke about Dubai's beaches being open at night because of the climate in their case. So, these new economies would need to emerge and would emerge, I think. So instead of maybe a nightclub, you could go for a dance class, like which typically we either have to do in the weekday or we either have to do on the weekend. And this just opens up time really differently, I think. And I think with things like self-checkout and AI, I mean, I can imagine that stores would be able to, again, just stay open longer, right? You'd maybe need less people and some of the rules they can change, especially if it feels like cities are getting safer, there's more people, there's more activity, the night kind of changes, and like I said, climate plays a role in this. We've seen it with, I think, Lana, it was your story, right, in Arizona and not being able to go to the park because it was so hot. And then we saw the glow in the dark playground. Exactly. So it's like reimagining like this nightlife and what we could do with it. And I think the decline in alcohol supports that, right? Because it changes the nature of what we do at night and how we behave. And so it really brought up this thing around, can the average citizen kind of take back the night? And yeah, does less alcohol help promulgate a different, maybe even a more active nightlife, but in ways that we haven't really imagined until now. So yeah, that was my signal.
I love that. That's so provocative, and what a really, really great signal. I mean, but part of something that came to mind is, I think, something that Sue has brought up before, but how some cities are trying to regulate light pollution. And so they keep the city dark at night. So there's something there around, like, what are some of these effects if we have a more vibrant and different nightlife? But we also want to have safety, right? We also want to have, it needs to be well lit because we don't have the sun. There is something there around the decline of nightclubs and the loneliness epidemic, right? Like, people are just not going out as much. They're not socializing as much as they used to. And so I love the idea of encouraging different types of activities where people can still socialize and be together, and it doesn't have to be revolving around alcohol or some of the things that maybe used to dominate nightlife. So that's really cool. I think another thing that I had found that I thought was interesting, it's related to what you're saying, things that are used to be revolved around alcohol. So for example, drunk driving, right? It's huge problem. The one recent innovation that has come up is marijuana breathalyzers. So it used to be that, right, I mean, I think it still is, this is just a thing, is like, for marijuana, it stays in the system for a long time. So they would have trouble like implementing a breathalyzer because you couldn't tell if it was something that was like recent or if it was just like a holdover of substance that's still in your body. And so now they're making advancements on that, where you take the breathalyzer test and then you take it again, but like after like 30 minutes to an hour, and then they'll be able to tell if you have like reached a certain threshold of that in your system that would impair your ability to drive, for example. And so that to me just reminded me that's like, as our behavior shifts, like these different technologies and stuff will also shift in the name of, in this case, public safety.
Yeah, what you're talking about, the breathalyzer, I was thinking along the lines of substitution effect. Having gone through many dry Januaries myself, I always wind up finding something else that'll take my attention, right? And so I just wondered, if it's not alcohol, then what are these possible substitutions and what are side effects as a result? I mean, even just thinking about the loneliness epidemic, I mean, that might be one side effect of just people not being able to gather or not gathering in bars and things like that. Then what's the solution for that, right? Like, are they going to produce these drinks that also now say, oh, this can help with your mental health? Who knows, right? But there's always an opportunity of whatever is going to happen after this. Like, I was thinking, one interesting thing is, with wine in the production process, there are many times, like Rocky, you're talking about the added sugar. They add sulfites, they add different components in it. So if it turns out that some of the cannabis or some other herbal supplements or something else becomes really interesting, I haven't looked it up. I don't know if it exists already, but are there basically blends now where in wine you're now getting a mix of some of these things too? Yeah, I was just really curious about that. But yeah, maybe in the future, you're just going to see a lot more blending of these different worlds as one industry is trying to survive and the other one is really taking off.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's exactly that. That's so interesting. So I think it's like convergence, right? Is the word here. It's Lana, like you were speaking about the marijuana test, and I was like, yeah, but that would be an interim thing as well, because I feel like, well, what if self-driving does come really soon? Then it's like game over, right? But yeah, so I mean, yeah, definitely right about the substitution effect, though, right? Especially if something's always, like I said, it's been part of our culture for so long. It's so interesting. How do you replace that? And I think we can all attest to this. Some people you can only be around when you're drinking. Right? So it's like, okay, well, I'll have to be high now. So so I think it's funny. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I'm really excited. I'm excited to see if there's some drinks I can try now. So I'm going to go and have a look in the supermarket. I think we should all do that as homework, like go into the aisles and see what's out there, And I think we'll be surprised at what's so different and what are the ingredients in these drinks. I think, is there anything else either of you want to add for today?
No,
Yeah.
yeah, I share your optimism. And I think, especially like alcoholism is a disease. The fact that there are this sort of growing acceptance of more like sober, curious lifestyle. There's these alternative products. I think that's all really positive, development for people who are really struggling. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see, as you mentioned, kind of the different consequences, right? The different ripple effects as this continues.
Yeah. Beautifully summating, I think, for us, Lada, there. Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed, this week's episode. We'd love to hear if you've done Dry January and what's the experience been for you. Have you found any interesting products? Please let us know. And you can find us at horizonshiftlab.com. And we will see you again next week with a whole new theme and delving into all new kinds of signals. So we will catch you then. Bye for now.